Everyone, welcome back to another hardware news recap of the week. We have a ton of stuff coming up later this week as well. Some exclusive and interesting stories you are going to want to see, so make sure you check back throughout the week for those. But for today, we're talking about RTX 40 series announcements of announcements. That's right, these are real. They're not rumors or leaks this time. Also, Intel officially publishing its Arc specs for the rest of the GPU stack. It's feeling some pressure with NVIDIA's launch coming up, and it's decided that now, only a little bit late, it's time to launch the rest of the Arc series. Zotac, in leaks, has managed to leak RTX 4090s that look like they're 4 to 5 slots deep. And then we're talking about DDR5 and some other topics. Before that, this video is brought to you by the Thermaltake Tower 100. Thermaltake's Tower 100 is a mini ITX case to serve as a showcase system for your components. The Tower 100 has received many revisions since we first saw it, and the case now has an open vent in the bottom for intake, a mesh cutout in the side panel for some GPU ventilation, and additional mesh along the side skirts and the side panels of the case. The Tower 100 is mostly focused on building a showpiece PC that's small enough to fit on most tables. Learn more at the link in the description below. First up, quick GN Store update to those limited edition foil skeleton shirts that had all the PC components forming a rib cage and a spine and all of that we launched previously. Those are in production. They're not going to be too long until they're done. So we're looking at hitting our original targets of sometime in October to start shipping those out. So we're getting pretty close at this point to finalizing those orders. It was, as we said before, it was a pre-sale to get all the quantities in, figure out the size distribution, and get the production running, which is now up and running, and we're just kind of waiting on finishing it up and shipping it. So we're still on target for in October for shipping those out. Just wanted to update everyone. And also, by the way, we still have the 10% of GN Store revenue going to Cat Angels, the cat shelter locally, a nonprofit, where through the 17th of September, we'll be giving 10% of everything you buy on the store to them to help them out. Okay, first major news story. NVIDIA, as is now tradition, announces an announcement. However, AMD has still bested NVIDIA because recently AMD announced an announcement of an impending announcement of announcements. So, NVIDIA, it's time to up your game a little bit here. Actually, please don't. This one redundant announcement, one nested announcement is enough of announcements. So this announcement is talking about the probably RTX 40 series. It's going to be at GTC coming up, and NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang will be the one making the announcement of the announcement. We'll consolidate these into just one announcement with maybe a squared sign. Can we, if the editors could please, announcement squared. So NVIDIA says this is a GeForce Beyond special broadcast, and it's going to be at GTC. It's all but guaranteed at this point that they're going to be announcing the new Ada architecture GPUs, named for programmer Ada Lovelace. And up until now, there were only rumors that NVIDIA would be covering anything gaming related at the event, but NVIDIA has launched gaming GPUs at GTC in the past, and we've actually covered them in person. NVIDIA dropped a big hint on Twitter, telling everyone to, quote, look beyond. The images contain a sequence of triangles that decode to read GeForce Beyond, and then it says the 20th of September 2022. Getting some Order of 10 vibes here, which was actually a really cool launch event in the industry. That was for the 10 series cards. Fun fact, they had 9-inch nails cover art in the background of one of the images for the Order of 10, probably not licensed or permitted, but it was there. NVIDIA told us there would be a special performer at the event. We said, is it Trent Reznor? And they said, you'll wish it was. Anyway, recent leaks had pricing listed, but board partners routinely let us know every launch that they actually don't get the price of the video cards of the GPUs publicly until basically Jensen Huang is on stage. So the pricing numbers that are out there right now, if you've seen them, we're not going to even drop the numbers. They're placeholders. That we know for a fact. The way this works is the board partners, so EVGA, MSI, Gigabyte, all of them, they don't really know the prices much before any of us do, which is absolutely insane, but that's the way it works. And so MSRP isn't known, which means they're kind of guessing at their price based on what they know the card costs to build so far, and they make multiple SKUs that are placeholders that sit on Amazon or Best Buy or whatever, and then when it's ready to go and they know the price, they let one of them through and they delete the rest. So the prices you're seeing out there now are placeholders. Who knows? They could land accurately, but it would be by chance. Next one, Intel publishes the A550, A750, and A770 GPU specs. This is another actual news item, not a rumor. So these GPUs, the common components are broken down into Xe cores, which can be thought of maybe similarly to an NVIDIA SM or an AMD CU, compute unit. And they also have XMX engines and then RT cores for ray tracing for the latter. So here's the table of what they're showing. The A380 is the one that we already reviewed. That's known to have 8 Xe cores. It's not news. The A580 increases that 3 times by moving to 24 Xe cores, but you shouldn't anticipate a linear 3x scaling in performance. Doesn't really work that way. It'd be nice if it did, though. Beyond that, the A750 and A770 are most similar to each other on this at 28 Xe cores and 32 Xe cores, respectively. The RT units scale in step with the Xe cores at 1 RT unit per Xe core. XMX engines are useful for things like image processing and interpolation and also scale in step at 16 engines per core. For frequency, the A580 is the only product that steps down in frequency when compared to everything else. Maybe it's running closer to the limits of a smaller die, for example, whereas the Arc 7 GPUs run at 2050 to 2100 megahertz. The A770 notably will come in 8GB and 16GB variants, although memory bandwidth is listed only as its maximum number, so up to 560 gigabytes per second, with no lower number listed for the 8GB SKU. And the up to is very small. As for what the words graphics clock mean in Intel's language, here's what Intel's Tom Peterson had to say about the subject. He said, quote, "Let's pick a couple of apps that are representative of typical gameplay. We're going to run those on real silicon and look at those clocks and see where they go. Based on those benchmarks, we'll draw a line right down the middle and say, this is your typical clock." Now, additionally, they had another slide listing the TDP at 225 watts for the A770 and A750, and the Intel-made cards were shown with an 8-pin and 6-pin header. Up next, some RTX 4090 leaks. Gee, wonder if the special announcement is going to be about the RTX 40 series. Guess we'll find out soon. So NVIDIA obviously has its end of September announcement coming up fast, and a recent photo in step with this on Baidu showed RTX 40 series Zotac cards, specifically the AMP model, on a factory assembly line straight out of the SMT ovens, basically. So these cards look like they are sized at 4 to maybe almost 5 slots on the assembly line. Of note, these 4090s are still using a partial flow-through design on the backplate. There's LED lighting along the logo mark next to the GPU core on the backside. And in terms of purely design choices, they've violated Apple's patent on curved geometry in a technical device. If we zoom in on the PCB as well, you'll see that it looks to be the size of a standard reference board. However, the cooler is large and the PCB terminates only 3/4 the way down that backplate. This enormous amount of overhang begins to resemble a small form factor cooler almost entirely on its own, and it enables the flow-through design Zotac has opted to go with. The size of the cooler is congruent with the rumors of high power previously and therefore high thermals that we've been talking about for months now. Now, boards that don't run the full length of the cooler, where they stop and then the cooler overhangs a bit more, have to address the power cable management problem, where obviously a power cable goes somewhere, and typically the solution is either it sits in the middle of the entire card, so it's at the end of the PCB, but in the middle of the cooler stack, so you've got something a little bit ugly coming out of the middle of the card in your PC, or they run basically an extension with really thick soldering for the power cables on the board all the way down to the cooler, like we saw in the Gigabyte RTX 3080 Eagle when we tore that down. This is just weird. You can see what they did was they were limited on space on the board, and they wanted 2 8-pins, which are present on the outside anyway, in this kind of gross plastic housing. So we couldn't easily see the power connectors on this from the angle that we have, but the RTX 40 cards will mostly be either the PCIe Gen 5 12-pin spec. That's not the same as NVIDIA's previous 12-pin spec, or they'll just be standard 8-pin, 6-pin combinations. The factory also leaked the Zotac box art here, and this shows the front side of the AMP 4090. In terms of aesthetics, it looks actually sort of similar to Intel's IBCs or Intel branded cards for Arc, in that it's got all the curves around the fans on it. So as for marketing, these cards say that they love gaming and power the win. Up next, DDR5 getting cheaper, hopefully. So DDR5 is in a transitional period. This is standard where moving from 3 to 4 took a few years, and moving to 4 to 5 will take a few years to really stabilize. But as we are moving off of Alder Lake and into AM5 and Raptor Lake CPUs, we're also moving more into DDR5 territory, especially with AMD, where 4 is simply not an option. It's physically impossible to use DDR4 in AM5. So DDR5 came onto the market at roughly triple the cost of DDR4 at the time, and it's since fallen to roughly double. This trend in price drops is expected to continue by Digitimes, who were informed by their industry sources that entry-level DDR5 chips are going to fall in price through the second half of 2022 and into 2023. For reference, Digitimes has extremely accurate rumors and leaks, typically with this type of stuff. Also, you can look at TrendForce and get DDR pricing trends in actual real time, plus a quarter or so, and it is going down. And when we talk about DDR5 chips here, we're talking about the actual pieces that go on the stick. So that price is falling, means that the stick price will fall as well. Price cuts aren't all we need though. We also need better or more mature modules. SK Hynix is now producing a die, which has just recently become available in Asia and is expected to make its way into consumer kits for other markets by the end of the year. Igor's lab recently reviewed a 16 GB by 2 kit of Hynix A die purchased direct from China. The kit is on a new JEDEC spec of DDR5 5600 with timings of 46, 45, 45, 89 at 1.1 volts. This is 800 megatransfers per second faster than existing kits' JEDEC speed of 4,800 megatransfers per second. Now, Igor over at Igor's lab was able to take the kits all the way up to 8,000 megatransfers per second with timings of 38, 50, 50, 40 at 1.4 volts when running only one stick. When moving up to 2 sticks, there was a frequency hit and you had to drop to lower speeds, but this could also be as simple as a lack of binning or possibly CPU IMC quality, or the integrated memory controller quality on the CPU, or board quality as well with topographies. So what this all means is current DDR5 kits with XMP top out at 6,600 megatransfers per second. Getting up to around 8,000 megatransfers per second would be a very large jump, and we expect to see further maturity in the kits. Obviously, as time goes on, it just looks like that window is end of year to early 2023. Up next, ASRock in BIOS damage control mode. So in the last hardware news video, we talked about some news about ASRock putting a sticker on its RAM slots for upcoming AMD X670E motherboards for AM5 CPUs. And those stickers warned of long boot times for first boot. And basically, if you have multiple sticks of RAM, obviously more memory, they were recommending going down to fewer sticks to boot faster, or if you clear CMOS. Now, ASRock has since built new BIOS versions for these X670 and X670E motherboards that reduce the boot time to something a little more normal. So hopefully that means, relating back to last week, that this isn't just an AM5 wide thing, it was maybe an ASRock specific thing, as it sometimes is. Users will have to download the new BIOS and flash it to the board on their own, so even though these aren't available for purchase yet, they're still out there in warehouses and going out to the channel, which means that if you want to improve the boot times, you will be doing a day one BIOS flash. And for that, you could use BIOS flashback, which means you don't need a CPU in the socket, but you do have to be careful to not turn it off in the middle of the flash. Now, it seems that the community backlash got to ASRock on this one because it's one of the fastest press releases we've ever seen about something like this. Up next, MSI motherboard prices for X670 and X670E. Again, not rumors, this is real stuff. So MSI has officially published the first 4 of its AM5 motherboards with prices listed on its website, and it's not pretty. If you like things that are affordable, definitely gone a long way from AM4 originally, so an X370 and the like. So prices start at $290 for the cheapest board they're doing in the X670 class, and they scale up to $1,300 for the Godlike at the high end. Now, there were early rumors about the boards being more expensive for X670 and X670E than previously. Looks like that's solidifying. As a reminder, AMD says that it'll have boards as cheap as $125, but based on what we're seeing for the $300 spec from MSI, those are going to be really stripped down. The jump is really stark when you compare previous generation boards from MSI. X570 didn't have a Godlike board, but there was one for Z690 priced at $1,200. It's a $100 jump there. Not crazy. However, at one point, we paid $700 for an X470 or 370 Godlike, just for perspective. So we're nearly doubling that. For the X670E Ace, That's at $700, which is an insane difference of about $300 over the X570S Ace Max. The X670E Carbon Wi-Fi and X670 Pro Wi-Fi are priced $180 and $140 over the existing X570 counterparts, respectively. Now, some of this is chipset cost, where AMD's chipset that it's selling to the board partners has gone up in price. Some of it's complexity of design, where if you have an X670E chipset, you're, for example, running actually two chipsets in almost a Northbridge-Southbridge style. The rest of it, maybe they chalk it up some to inflation, some to component or materials costs, but the jump here is so large that there's also a baking in of additional margin now that AMD is a desirable brand. It's not like the early days of X370 where everyone trimmed their margins just to try and get something out the door as sort of a quid pro quo, hey, AMD and board partner, let's support each other in this venture and see how it goes. So it's quite a bit different now. Now, AMD's $125 mark, we would assume would be more like a Gigabyte D3H or something, and it'll be very short on features because if you look at the board demos I announced here, its cheapest one at about $300 doesn't even have a 7-segment display or buttons to power it on and off that are like on the board, which is insane. It's really crazy. Where is the money going? That is the question. We don't know if we'll find out. Someone's pocket, I guess. Next one. Corsair has a thin keyboard and a thick set of RGB support. So this week, Corsair is embracing its passions, which is mostly making pointless RGB bullshit. Starting off in the keyboard department, Corsair announced its new super thin K100 Air wireless mechanical keyboard. The K100 Air is only 11 millimeters thick at the slimmest point, and it uses Cherry MX low profile tactile switches, which we mentioned in a previous news video. The K100 Air connects over Corsair's Slipstream wireless, Bluetooth, or wired over USB, and battery life, here's the crazy part, is rated at 50 hours with the lights on, or 200 hours with the lights off. That is a hell of a difference. It's a 4x gain in battery life. Those are some powerful LEDs, but that is what Corsair does now. The K100 Air releases on October 4th. Corsair isn't sharing pricing at this time, though. Now, as for the iQOO RGB Empire, there's been some rumblings within the nations of RGB software BS because Philips Hue and Corsair have now partnered with Signify to allow control of Philips Hue smart lighting within iQOO. If that sentence means nothing to you and sounds like it came straight out of Silicon Valley, the show, mocking Silicon Valley, the reality, then that's the expected behavior. The integration requires linking iQOO to a Philips Hue bridge, which in turn passes the programming onto the other lights. In addition to static colors and gradients, users can apply any of the existing iQOO effects like reacting to typing on the keyboard or changing color based on CPU temperature. Now, here at GN, we're personally really excited for when iQOO crashes inevitably and sets someone's entire house and all the Philips Hue devices to permanent rainbow. Up next, a leak for Intel Raptor Lake. Intel has a slide deck for the 13th gen of Raptor Lake CPUs that appeared on Igor's lab. Highlights include a skew chart, a chipset comparison, and a block diagram. Now, although the slides look legitimate to us as connoisseurs of Intel slide decks, for better or for worse, it is possible that since it's not out yet, obviously, some of these numbers could change. It's not uncommon for a manufacturer to tweak the frequency by a little bit before launch if it's far enough out. Anyway, starting with the skew chart, we can see that the rumors were correct about core count increases at least. So for the Intel 13000 series, the 13900K and 13900KF both feature 24 cores, that's 8 performance and 16 E-cores, and a maximum TVB, or thermal velocity boost, of 5.8 gigahertz on the performance cores. As a reminder, TVB happens, at least on existing parts, when you are under a certain temperature threshold. It's a really dumb toggle, not in a condescending way, but in a simple way, where it's 70 C or under, it boosts 100 megahertz, like in the 11 or 10 series, for example. 70 C or over, it doesn't. Now, that may change here, but we'll find out when it comes out. Moving down the stack, the 13700K and KF have 16 cores at 8P and 8E cores, and that's more like the previous generation 12900K, and they have a Turbo Boost Max 3.0 of 5.4 gigahertz. Lastly, the 13600K and KF are knocked down to 6P cores, and those can turbo to 5.1 gigahertz, as well as the 8E cores, which have different speed spec. Common to all of the listed CPUs is an upgrade to officially support DDR5 5600 memory. The 13900K, 13700K, and their KSs have a listed maximum turbo power of 253 watts, which is very high. The 13600K and KS come in significantly lower at 181 watts for the listed max. Now onto the chipset comparison slide. This doesn't have much in the way of changes for Z790 compared to Z690. The only updates listed are moving more of the chipset lanes to PCIe Gen 4 and one more 20 gigabit per second USB 3.2 Gen 2x2 port. Now, there's one more slide of interest, which is a block diagram. So this is the Z790 block diagram, and as you can see, it displays all the capabilities of I/O for the CPU and the chipset, and it's looking pretty familiar. We expect that the Raptor Lake CPUs will be announced for the 13th gen, that is, later this month, probably September 27th. That is when Intel is hosting its innovation event, and it's when it has the stage, so to speak, back from AMD, so that's a likely launch target. Up next, the race is over. Silverstone is the first company to actually sell a power supply for real that complies with ATX 3.0 and PCIe Gen 5 standards, and that PCIe Gen 5 standard will be relevant if you want a native 12-pin connector for the RTX 40 series, as opposed to either adapting or going with the standard 8 and 6 pins. So this is actually called the, not HELA, which I thought it was, the HELA 850, God, that's so stupid. The HELA 850R Platinum, HELA, HELA. You can actually buy it right now on Amazon at $215. Unlike the other ATX 3.0 power supplies that have been announced recently, this one is available. Now, Silverstone even went so far as to have it certified by Cybernetics and Eris over there, where it earned a platinum rating. The company also boasts the power supply can survive 24/7 use and 50°C for the operating temperature. The HELA 850R, it's getting kind of crazy between this and all the extremes lately, is fully modular. It has the new 12-pin connector, and it can also support cards that have a 12+4, where the 4 is Sense. So without independently testing it, we obviously can't say if it's definitively good right now. Something we'd like to test, but being certified for more than just efficiency via Cybernetics is pretty cool. Up next, a fun and simple story. So Japan is set to ditch floppy disks. That's right. Japan's digital minister has outlined a plan to allow Japan's citizens to submit formal government documents with means other than floppy disks and CDs, like using the internet for the new policies. So this, apparently, we just learned this, there are over 1,900 government regulations in Japan, or were until recently, and they cover how information can legally get from citizens to the government, and none of them mention the internet. So because of this, even digital documents have to be delivered in physical media, at least officially. So this change is part of an overall plan for government services to go online in Japan, which will naturally require cutting-edge technologies like the internet. Next one, Steam Deck dock with M.2 support. So the Steam Deck's been out for a while now, and docks are starting to come out. Heavy users already filling up standard storage on these, and a company called either ASRock or JSO or JSaux, we're not really sure how to pronounce it, but we're going to go with JSW. So JSW has a solution to the problem, and it's a docking station with a built-in M.2 slot. It's called the HB0604. Not the most memorable name, but neither is the company's. The M.2 slot will allow you to have a larger game library while docked. In addition, the dock provides HDMI out, USB 3.1 ports, and gigabit Ethernet over a single angled USB Type-C connector. This is starting to look similar to the Nintendo Switch style dock, so there's a real market for this for Steam Decks. And additionally, one downside here is that you have to manually mount the M.2 SSD in the Steam Deck after plugging it in each time, but JSaux, or whatever they're called, is working on it, and at the moment they are working on a script to handle this manually, and when we say mount, we mean basically through software. The HB0604 deck dock is listed at an early price of $100 without any SSD, and there are options for 1 terabyte and 2 terabyte models from $170 to $240. Once the early period ends, each of those prices will go up by $30. If you own and heavily use a Steam Deck, let us know in the comments if this is something that you could see yourself caring about or that you want us to look at. Now, finally, Wi-Fi 7 stretching its legs. So Intel and Broadcom participated in a demonstration to showcase the capabilities of Wi-Fi 7, also known as 802.11be, and they used a laptop with an Intel CPU and a Broadcom access point for this. The demo showed speeds of 5 gigabits per second over Wi-Fi 7 using 6 gigahertz band, compared to 2 gigabits per second on Wi-Fi 6E, also on 6 gigahertz band. So it's like for like there. Also, they showed 1 gigabit per second on Wi-Fi 6 non-E on the 5 gigahertz band. Intel's page on Wi-Fi 7 explains several of the technological changes being leveraged here, and it makes heavy use of analogies to moving boxes and trucks. At least it's better than when Samsung gives us the metric of full HD movies per second or whatever it is to describe memory speed. Anyway, for the record, Wi-Fi 7 is apparently a semi-truck. Wi-Fi 7 takes advantage of wide channels up to 320 megahertz in so far unused areas of the 6 gigahertz spectrum. Another new tactic at play is MLO, or multi-link operation, which allows devices to connect over more than one wireless band at a time and aggregate those links to raise total bandwidth. There's one other fun use case, which was wireless VR, which is currently doable using other wireless tech, but with peak bandwidths around 5 gigabits per second. We doubt it would be practical without lots of compression. Wi-Fi 7 isn't even certified yet, though, and that won't happen until 2023, and appearance in consumer devices not till 2024. That said, wireless devices are improving. Big surprise, but some of these are kind of cool improvements, actually. So that's it for the news this week. Thanks for watching. We have huge stories coming up over the next week or so. Subscribe for all of that. Make sure you check the notification bell, and thanks for watching. We'll see you all next time.